I'm talking about the resistance levels in the weekly time frame that we're at. We may overthrow them and still get a topping tail, still reach 100,000. My signals remain bullish in the weekly and the daily time frame. Talked about all of that. Again, wanted to make you aware of something. And again, it may be that we go higher with the 9 count that's developing that you'll see in this video, weekly time frame, and try to reach 100,000 with it. But shy of that level, we could just turn off the resistance levels, and I'll show you those trend lines. But one thing here I'm watching, do we still develop a divergence here? Do we end up going lower and developing it, or does it develop right here? We've already got one developing on the RSI, not so much here yet with momentum. So I'm going to be watching that, and then and again, if we do develop it immediately, that could take us to the 100,000 area and turn off of it. But right now we're at 95,000. Just pushing above the 93,000 level here. I have no topping signals, but I wanted to make you aware of, before we got today's rally, I did have a topping T above this current candle. It is not there. It went away. It has to remain there by the close. It did not. It may be, if we sell off by the end of the day, it may come back, but it could show up in the next couple of days. We had this red circle saying, hey, we could see a top very soon, short-term peak. This is just looking at short-term tops. Again, over here and over here, it showed up before we got these downturns. Okay, and over here, again, sometimes a bigger sell-off, as we've talked about in the past. But because we're not continuing on these other bars, it's saying, hey, calling this rally into question here. Even if we do go higher, it's saying, hey, be watching for a possible reversal to set up. That's what that's saying. But then we'll need to see the momentum flip here, and that has not yet flipped. And so again, just watching carefully the 100,000 area and the trend lines just below it here in the in the mid 90 to low 90,000 range there. Previous peak was 93,500. Now we're at 95,000. Looking at this area carefully, is it going to be close but no cigar for 100,000, or do we try to reach it and then turn? But I'll be watching. There are no other topping signals at this time, so just something to let you know. If it did show up at the beginning of the session, then went away with the rally. I'm telling you that because that means that it might show up in the next session or two. We might see it form again. And again, it's done a very good job. It's marked these short-term pullbacks with momentum here in this bigger move higher. Done a good job there. But it's also called the peaks with major pullbacks here of 29% in 8 days. Over here, big pullback, and then over here, a big pullback. And then even the short-term bottoms have been called with momentum very nicely here. And again, this is just looking at the momentum, and it's telling you, hey, prices are getting tired. But it did show up earlier, the little T forming, saying, hey, there could be a short-term top here. And again, it is just looking at short-term momentum. It did show up, but then it went away. So we might see it either this bar before the day ends, or again, later in the week. Just something worth paying attention to. Even if we go higher, it might form. Even if we go to 100,000, we hit 95. Even if we go higher and get a big rally in the weekly time frame, but then have it sell off before the weekends, again, it could still show up. So again, I'll let you know if it does. But right now, I don't have any other topping signals except the red circle saying, hey, one could show up. And again, we had that over here at this peak. We had it over here at this peak, and some of these other shorter term peaks before we got the pullbacks. So again, it's just saying, hey, again, prices are getting pretty extended, pretty tired, and that's why we're seeing divergences develop on indicators, but not quite here yet. So again, maybe if we sell off, this becomes a bigger divergence, or maybe we go to 100,000 and form it right here, right now, before all is said and done. But again, if you watch the video all the way through, you'll see the RSI is forming a divergence with our current rise to 95,000. Support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel today. If you could take a moment to do that, I would appreciate it. Follow the link below. It'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. But please consider helping out today. If we do get some signals here. I might make a very short video tomorrow if we get that surrounding NVIDIA, or if we push on up to 100,000 and see that happen, if we get a big rally, or if we start to get a sell-off at the trend lines of resistance, which you'll see in this video. Before we broke out of this trend line right here, I talked about the bullish scenarios, I talked about the bearish scenarios. I told you if we clear this trend line right here and get above 69,000 and stay above it, not drop back below it, then bullish scenario would be that we go up to these trend lines. Now, two bullish scenarios. One is that we stall and end up forming a divergence there on the RSI in the weekly time frame and the MACD and other indicators, much like what we did over here with the 2021 peaks. The other bullish scenario is that we come up to this level and either bust up through it or pull back and then bust up through it. This is the next level of resistance. Again, we had horizontal resistance at 69,000 here, which we struggled. We had about 10 attempts to get above that level, and then the 11th attempt we finally got above it here. But that has taken us to this next level, and we struggled at that horizontal resistance, and we struggled at this trend line right here, finally breaking up through it. So again, that's taken us to this next level. So now, again, if the bulls hang on to control, we'll eventually get up through this level or pull back and get up through it, or get a deeper pullback and maybe come back to 69,000 and then continue the advance if we get a deeper pullback. Back testing the trend line here at around 68,000 in the weekly time frame. Again, these are all bullish longer term scenarios that we just get a pullback, a deeper pullback or a more shallow pullback, whatever it may be, a shallow pullback, and then start clearing this level. The term bullish scenario. The shorter term bullish scenario is that we've just come up to this level and that we stall out here and we start a reversal and again end up forming a divergence like the 2021 top. Those are the two bullish scenarios that I talked about before we had the breakout. I talked about both of them. I talked about this trend line long before we ever broke out of the 69,000 range in this trend line right here. I talked about this trend line that we could eventually reach that if we did see the bulls regain control in the weekly time frame, which they did do successfully nearly 3 weeks ago. The bearish scenario is that we come up here and we stall at this trend line and we start a reversal and eventually see divergences complete in the weekly time frame, and eventually the signals in the weekly time frame revert back to bearish. But right now my daily signals are bullish, momentum remains bullish in the daily time frame, and then the weekly momentum and the weekly trend remain bullish. They have all turned to bullish. The bulls are in control. If that changes near this area right here. Now again, let me just bring these trend lines up close. So I want to show you the trend line from the 2021 tops. We overthrew that ever so slightly with the highs. We'll see if we get it, and I told you we may get above it, but not be able to close back above it. And that's this trend line right here. We got above it, and we went to this trend line right here, and we even inched above that just a little bit. And as what I'm watching is to see if we reverse off of these trend lines or stall in the bullish case, the longer term bullish case at these trend lines, again forming that divergence in the weekly time frame, or I'm sorry, the daily time frame on the RSI there. Do we stall in this area this week, or do we try to bust up there? Now with this candlestick, it is a 9 count reversal signal. Now sometimes you get a 9 count. Let me just bring this up for you so you can see it. Sometimes you get a 9 count, and the 9 count is the peak. The 8 or 9 bar is the peak, and you start to turn immediately. Other times, you overthrow that level a little bit. Where here we are getting it right at this major resistance level. So I'm watching to see if we get a turn with the 9 count after this week, or does it give us a topping tail by the end of the week? Or again, like I said, do we blow past this area with the NVIDIA earnings and end up with the topping tail and a shooting star or something like that? Blowing past this area, we did slightly, but not able to close above it. Do we go up to 100,000, over 100,000, and then begin to get a topping tail or reversal? We could still reach 100,000 and go above this area here, but still end up with and the week is still young. Here we are Wednesday. We don't close out the week until Sunday. We could still go up to 100,000 and get a topping tail and overthrow this level. So do keep that in mind. But I am looking at this 9 count because it is showing price exhaustion. And again, it started in the consolidation area after, again, our bottom at 53,000 here, bouncing off the 52,000 area, bounced off of our 50-week moving average. Got back above the 20. The blue line, back tested it, overthrew it, came back, found support here. Again, the 10-week moving average ended up getting a doji there, and then again getting back above this. I talked about at the time we were getting back above the 20, we were getting back above my 100 period, and then we bounced off of them, both of them over here, the 100 period and the daily, and the 20 we pulled back to just beyond it and got a bounce off the 10 just above it, and then surge. So again, I'm a big believer in the 20-week moving average in the weekly and the 100-day in the daily time frame. So again, going to be watching this 9 count here. Now maybe we just put a peek in right around this level, but we could also see a big topping tail, as I've talked about, and overthrow this area, okay, and still reverse off of it, okay, or even get a close above it, but then have it be a head fake of a failed breakout. So it could play out a couple different ways, but I'm watching to see if we turn in this neighborhood right here, this area, in the not too distant future, or do we try to rise up and hit 100,000 and then turn? Now, clearing this level and closing above it and holding above it, not dropping back below it, that would be bullish, and that could take us to 115, 110, in that range in there. If we take our time, 120,000. The trend lines I've been talking about in the weekly time frame that are the next level of resistance. But this is the resistance level that I'm focusing on right now. And like I said, if we go higher and go to 100,000 and then turn down, maybe with the NVIDIA earnings, again, you could see a topping tail this week. You could see this 9 count begin to play out, but we still might go higher as the 9 count is still under construction. So do keep that in mind. We very well could reach 100,000 and then begin to turn off of hitting 100,000 or slightly overthrowing it. But again, I'm going to be watching. Do we close above these trend lines? Do we close strong? Do we close weak? Do we get a topping tail? Same thing I told you over here with this bar. Do we close strong or do we close weak? We close strong. The bulls regain control. Here we closed weak. Do we get a candle that looks like that up here in this area, overthrowing these trend lines or stalling near these trend lines, one or the other? So do keep that in mind. We still may reach 100,000 with this 9 count bar that we're getting here in the weekly time frame. Now, right now, Bitcoin is up 4.29% for the week, and for the week we have that 9 count into these trend lines that I've been talking about. If we clear these trend lines, strong close above this area, again, we could rise, and again, talking about a fake out or a false breakout above this level where you get a topping tail or you get a close above it and it's a head fake and you drop right back below it. I'm talking about legitimate breakout above this level where you close above it and you remain above it. If we do, then again, this channel comes into play. This trend line right here, parallel to this boundary right here, is pointing up here to the 10 or 15,000 area. If we take our time reaching it, maybe it's 120,000. Did I say 10 or 15? 110, 115,000. Sorry about that if I misspoke there. But I'm looking for a potential target level should we clear this resistance rather than turn off of it, 110, 120. I think you're probably going to turn off of it and either get a pullback or a reversal, one or the other. The reversal would have to be that we start seeing the divergences in the weekly and the monthly time frame begin to play out, and we start seeing the stock market sell off, which again, we're going to have a recession. So again, this is problematic. The bullish case for Bitcoin is that we go to the new highs, bullish phase, ahead of the recession on into the first quarter or maybe early into the second quarter of 2025. So you're looking at maybe going into February, March, or on into April, somewhere maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter, earlier in the first quarter, something like that. But into the first or second quarter, the recession is likely going to hit in the first or second quarter in all likelihood. Bitcoin, when we get the recession, Bitcoin is going to price in a recession. It could have a bull market ahead of the recession if we continue. The bearish actually the first bullish scenario is that we have broken out, but then we top in this area right here, and we begin to turn and start pricing in the recession. The longer term bullish scenario is that eventually we clear this area, maybe we pull back or we get above it and back test it, whatever, and we go higher ahead of the recession if my signals, which are correct, remain bullish in the weekly time frame. Now again, you start seeing my signals turn back to bearish, then all bets are off. Again, I'm watching very closely as the bulls and bears fight it out right here, just as I watched right here. The bulls won here, the bears won over here, and again, we're going to be watching to see how this develops and unfolds going forward. But again, you're getting a 9 count going into these trend lines. Even if you get a topping tail, you could still, even if you go to 100,000, you could still get a topping tail, I should say, and still get a reversal or a pullback here. So we're going to be watching that 9 count in the weekly time frame. That will complete by Sunday. And again, either the 9 count can mark a turning point, or you can go a little bit higher and then get the turn. But I'm going to be watching that closely because NVIDIA is getting a 9 count this week too with the earnings. So it's kind of interesting. The two assets with the most volatility are getting 9 counts in the weekly time frame, NVIDIA and Bitcoin. Again, here it is on Bitcoin. Okay, and again, at that major trend line, those trend lines of resistance, be watching to see how we close. And like I said, we may go higher, hit 100,000, turn down. We may just turn right here and get a topping tail and stall right at those trend lines as we're just slightly above them right now with our intra-week high. But here's the 9 count on Bitcoin. And here's Microstrategy. You're even getting a 9 count. Microstrategy, again, you'll pay a premium if you try to use this as an avenue to buy Bitcoin, because again, the PE ratio is ridiculous. And again, it's better just to buy Bitcoin directly. But again, it is also getting a 9 count here in the weekly time frame. So again, we'll be watching by the end of the week. Do we get topping tails? If we look at the Bitcoin ETF, this is IBIT, IBIT. The Bitcoin ETF is also getting a 9 count this week. It had a 13 fall by 9. Previously, we had the 9 count over here, and that gave us back in March, that gave us this volatility here. Now we're getting a 13.9, which is a reversal pattern, by the way. Bitcoin's only getting the 9, but the Bitcoin ETF is getting a 13.9 double sequence count reversal signal in the weekly time frame. So again, something worth paying attention to here with IBIT, the Bitcoin ETF. And then here's NVIDIA. NVIDIA is also, along with Bitcoin, getting a 9 count. Now again, the week is not over yet, so again, it could be canceled out if we sell off with NVIDIA earnings and close below the bar from 4 weeks ago, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you start closing below this bar right here, which we did at the beginning of the week. The 9 count was getting wiped out. Now we're seeing a rally. If NVIDIA can rally with the earnings, then we can complete this. And again, the 8 or 9 bar has to be the high of the count. So far, it is not. There's no perfected signal above it like over here, because here the 8 bar was the high of the count. Here bar 7 is the high of the count so far. The 8 or 9 have to be the high of the count. So here with NVIDIA. So just watching these 9 counts develop. You've got it on NVIDIA here. You've got it on Bitcoin. You've got it on the Bitcoin ETF. You've got it on MicroStrategy. So it's kind of interesting. Is what that tells us is prices are getting tired. And again, either we're going to get a pullback or a reversal. That's what it is suggesting here. It set up a short-term reversal on NVIDIA, and we see recession coming, which I believe we will. NVIDIA could terminate the AI rally. And again, we could be setting up a very, very large head and shoulders pattern here on NVIDIA. But like I said, it may go higher, just like I'm saying with Bitcoin. The 9 count, you could get the 8 or 9 bar being the high of the count, or you can go a little higher and then you turn. And again, that is common as well. So just some things to be aware of. So much complacency, which again, resistance with Bitcoin. Either we're going to get a pullback in all likelihood, maybe overthrow the level and probably get a pullback. The odds greatly favor it, or a possible reversal if divergences begin to play out there in the weekly time frame with Bitcoin. Show you NVIDIA here and the Bitcoin ETF and Microstrategy, because they're all getting these 9 counts, showing price exhaustion as Bitcoin's pushing into resistance. So is NVIDIA, by the way. We'll be watching what happens with the rally. Do we start clearing the resistance levels, and with Bitcoin too? But then can we remain above those resistance levels? And that's a weekly resistance I've been talking about here in this video and my last video. I'm making the video, Bitcoin is dropping a little bit further. Again, we're right now up 0.128%. So again, we were up 1.5, and we were up much higher at 95,000 earlier. Currently, we're at 93,600, just under 600 there. And again, the 100 period moving average, that's this pink line right here. I've drawn this parallel boundary up here from these highs over here, and this low over here, and this low here. And again, it's right in this area. But we have, again, Bitcoin getting above the 100, the pink line here, and then throwing back to it. I talked about the bullish divergence that I was looking for to set up here before it happened. It did. Again, surrounding the 50 and the 200. I told you we were going up to these trend lines right here to the 68, 69,000 area. Overthrow it to 70, 71,000. We overthrew it and moved above it to test 73,000. And I told you with that overthrow of the horizontal resistance that opened the door of clearing this area right here, that opened the door, just coming right here, just underneath the peak of March. I told you that, again, we would likely see a pullback to the trend line. We did. And then, again, a new high after that. And then I told you to be watching the 78 or 77, 78,000 area, which was about $4,000 above this area right here, just under $78,000. It's about 77,887, I think, was the number. But anyways, regardless, I told you if we stalled there and turned, that would be bearish. If we blow through past that area, then again, we would likely see a strong close in the weekly time frame and flip the weekly signals, the trend of the weekly signals back to bullish. But again, the signals have been consistently bullish through this advance from 52,000, as I've said. Again, signals have been bullish all along, except for this pullback right here, and I'm flipped here for this pullback right here at the 69,000 area, and then again before the sell-off right here, again predicting that we'd pull back right here, momentum also. But I told you we were going to go and bust up through this level, and then to be watching can the bulls retake control in the weekly time frame, and they did. So my signals have been consistently bullish since 52,000 right here, and again just calling some of these pullbacks. But before we broke out here, I told you that if we kept going past the 77, 78,000 area, then you have those trend lines in the weekly time frame to contend with, which is where we would likely see prices stall out at, and then we'll see again, did we just get a pullback or did we get a reversal there? Again, signals still remain bullish. If momentum flips, then I'll be watching to see, does the trend change? Does it give us a pullback? Does it give us a reversal? But my signals, again, have been consistently bullish through the advance. Now we're watching this next level of resistance. Do we bust through it or do we pull back? We are forming the divergence on the RSI in the daily time frame, and a triple divergence on the RSI in the 4-hour time frame at these levels. We'll see how we close here by the end of the session, and then going on into after hours. In after hours today, we're going to get the NVIDIA earnings. What does the stock market do? What does Bitcoin do? Will the NVIDIA earnings produce a reversal for NVIDIA or take it higher? We'll be watching. That could impact Bitcoin. Like I said, again, we may see the market rally and Bitcoin sell off, or Bitcoin rally and the market sell off. Sometimes they have been moving in lockstep together. But again, I'm watching closely to see if NVIDIA will impact Bitcoin at all, the NVIDIA earnings after the bell today. Now, I talked to you about the 4-hour chart. Again, we had a possible head and shoulders or a triangle that, again, could be a 3 drives to a high, 1, 2, and then now 3 if we turn out this level of resistance. We talked about the divergence over here. Prices corrected sideways, much like what we have with this divergence back over here. They corrected sideways and went higher. Corrected sideways, went higher. We're still at the resistance level, but we're just slightly overthrowing it, going into the low 95,000 area. We had pushed above this peak previously at 93,500. So again, I talked about both of those scenarios. Ended up being a triangle setup. We broke out, we back tested, and again, we're flirting with that area. But we are forming a triple divergence here in the 4-hour time frame. We're forming a divergence in the daily time frame. You can see a similar divergence developing here on the MACD in the 4-hour time frame. Now, with about 5 hours left in the trading session here for Wednesday, Bitcoin is currently up 1.5%. It's up to 93,800. It was as high as the low 95,000 area. And again, I've been talking about a divergence developing here on the RSI. We're getting that now. We saw a peak. We pulled back slightly. Okay, and then very, very similar to here. We had at a peak, we pulled back slightly, and then we went on higher. We had a peak, we pulled back slightly. We got that topping tail there at 93,500, pull back, and then now we've gone a little bit higher, and we're forming this divergence, which again looks something very similar to this at the resistance area. So what I'm going to be watching is, again, same thing I keep saying, are we going to turn down off of this resistance area? If we do, is it a pullback or is it a reversal? Do the bears regain control, or do the bulls hang onto control in the weekly time frame? Or do we bust on through this level? And if you do, you need to close above it. There in the weekly time frame, you need to remain above it. And then again, the 110, 115,000 area comes into play, which is the next set of trend lines overhead. But right here, we very well could reverse off of these trend lines I've been talking about as we're forming this negative divergence. Now again, the MACD, no signs of rolling over yet. We'll be watching that. We'll be watching the histogram. Does it turn back up when we start trying to bust through that level? But we do have that divergence on the RSI there developing already, which again has been present at tops and bottoms that have been throughout the consolidation period. So again, we'll be watching to see what happens here. NVIDIA earnings after the bell here on Wednesday. We'll be watching. Does that help or hurt Bitcoin? And again, does a market rally and Bitcoin sell off, or do they all rally, or do they all sell off? Which is it? We'll be watching level of resistance and this divergence very carefully with a Bitcoin. The breakout that we had was on very good volume. And again, it flipped the weekly signals back to bullish with the back test here of the trend line. I'm going to be watching the next pullback that we get. Is it reversal off the trend lines I've been talking about, or to pull back, building momentum to clear them and going to the next level of resistance? 110, 115, 120,000 is the next level of resistance. Remember, here in the weekly time frame, I talked about these two trend lines. We had moved just above, slightly above that level at that 95,000 peak that we reached. The weekly chart is getting a 9-count reversal signal at these trend lines. And again, we may overthrow them, as I've said. But again, it's what I'm watching for is, does this mark a reversal, forming a divergence that looks something similar to back over here on the RSI, something similar here on the MACD. The MACD forming something that looks very similar to this, where we went a little bit higher, but then we turned. Now, this was just $4,100 higher. This was clearly much higher than that, from 73,700 and some change up to this 95,000 area. So a much bigger move higher. But do we stall at this resistance level? That's what I'll be watching. We continue to have a bullish 20-50 signal. You're above the 20-week moving average, which is now turning back up, and you're above the 50 level on the RSI. That would have to change in order for a reversal to happen. You'd have to lose the 20-week, and you'd have to lose the 50 level on the RSI for a 2050 sell signal. Currently, we have a 2050 bullish buy signal continuing to play out. When we got back above the 20 here in the weekly time frame, we got back above that 100, and then we back tested them. I talked about that at the time. But signals remain bullish. My signals flipped back to bullish with the breakout. Momentum was already bullish off of, in the weekly time frame, off of the 53,000 low. Right after those lows were put in at 52,000, momentum flipped back to bullish on my weekly signals. But again, here we still have a bullish signal. In order for the bears to turn it around and start selling off and get rejection here, we'd have to get rejection and see the RSI start dropping back below 50 like we did over here and drop back below the 20-week moving average. If they trigger a reversal off of these resistance levels rather than just a pullback, so we're watching to see. But my signals remain bullish in the daily time frame, in the weekly time frame. Momentum is likely going to flip very soon. It could flip tomorrow with the NVIDIA earnings or overnight on into the next few days, or try to go a little bit higher with the NVIDIA earnings, but then see the momentum flip. So I'm watching these levels of resistance carefully. But the RSI here, get a little bit closer right here with the close up here on the weekly chart. Again, these trend lines, we've come up and we just overthrew this trend line right here from the 2021 highs, this trend line right here. We just overthrew it slightly and hit this other trend line from the 2021 low there on that trough low that separates those two 2021 peaks. And we just moved up into that trend line ever so slightly there, inching above the previous 2021 peaks, that trend line. So again, we broke out of this trend line. That flipped my weekly signals back to bullish. The trend, the momentum cloud is bullish. We're holding above it. We got back above it, and we found support at it and our 20-week moving average. So again, my signals remain bullish, but I'm watching this divergence closely. And again, this divergence could play out immediately and give us a pullback or a reversal, or it may take time to form. It may not be done, and we could go end up going a whole lot higher before it plays out. So again, it could be still under construction. So just some things to be paying attention to. Now here is Bitcoin in the daily time frame with the futures. Now we've went a little bit higher above the trend line on the weekly time frame. We'll see if we close above it or not. But right now, this is our second bar now. Here on Wednesday. On Tuesday, we got the first red bar showing, again, momentum could be starting to wane here at the resistance level there in the weekly time frame. We're also setting up a divergence on many indicators like the RSI and here on the stochastic Bitcoin daily chart. And here with the awesome oscillator, just like so many signals in the weekly time frame, the stochastic, the MACD, hitting a lower tower as we push to higher levels. Now, again, this may not be done, but it is forming a divergence. So again, if we begin to see momentum flip back down as momentum wanes, and that's what the awesome oscillator is suggesting, not that the divergence is done yet. We don't know. We don't have enough information for that here in the weekly time frame. But again, signals turning back to bullish in the consolidation momentum here, and have flipped trend signals back to bullish in the weekly time frame as I've been talking about.